Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of our weekly Open Innovation Conversations. These are weekly tidbits and discussions about open innovation as we are following the Oxford Handbook of Open Innovation, published 1 year ago already. It's a book edited by Henry Chesbrough, Agnieszka Radziwiłł, Bim van Haverbeke, and Joe West, where they gathered the knowledge of open innovation as it is today, inviting many authors. And every week we are reviewing, in a 15-minute conversation, each of the chapters with their authors. This is such a joyful path for a person like me, I'm Marisol Menendez. I'm an open innovation practitioner, an ecosystem orchestrator. I'm a fangirl of the concept of open innovation since I was appointed to creating the open innovation department at BBVA, which is a global Spanish bank. And since then, I've been doing open innovation continuously. And so I've been enjoying this journey a lot and getting to learn firsthand from those who have written these chapters. And today is a very special day for me because we have no other than Professor Saras Sarasvathy. Welcome today. How are you, Saras? How are you today?
I'm great and so lovely to meet you, Marisol. And you actually pronounced my name correctly, so I'm particularly delighted.
I've been practicing a lot saying your name out loud when citing your work, so I'm very happy for that. And really, I wanted, as always, to dedicate the time to get to know you a little better. No, we are enjoying a lot learning about the individuals, the people, the person who is behind the chapter. So, can you please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit more about you?
Okay, so I hope you have 3 hours. Just kidding. I was born and raised in Mumbai, in India. And because of some life circumstances, which I don't need to explain, I have explained in other places as well. I had to find, a scholarship. Otherwise, I could not go to college. And as part of the process, they made us read. There was a particular scholarship called the Tata Scholarship, and it was set up by the Tata Foundation in India. It's a very old, very successful collection of companies, actually. So they made us read the biography of the founder of the Tata companies. And that was like a conversion experience for me. So I said, if I get the scholarship, this is what I want to do with my life. And I did win the scholarship. And so I became an entrepreneur. I had co-founded 5 ventures. And by that time, I was beginning to think, why is it that everybody who comes into entrepreneurship is learning everything the hard way? Why don't we teach this in schools and colleges and things like that? Of course, traditionally, in almost every society, people from the business community, your parents are business owners or something, you start businesses. But we have entered an era of technology and possibility, and all kinds of people now want to start all kinds of interesting ventures. And we had no teaching, no education for entrepreneurship at that time. And so I used to complain to everybody all the time, like, why are we not doing this? And until some, people around me said, why the heck don't you do it yourself? And you are an entrepreneur. And so I decided to come into academia. I was very fortunate to be able to come to the United States. And I decided to do it the hard way, which is go through the full PhD program and the tenure process, and not just assume that because I haven't been an entrepreneur, I know a lot about it. It was very humbling to be in the university academic system, because very quickly you understand that simply generalizing from your experiences is not enough. And so I'm very glad I got this opportunity, and I now love being an academic as much as I love being an entrepreneur. And so that's kind of my story in a nutshell. Except the way it leads to research is, of course, that the only question or the only topic in my head as a PhD student was what to teach, right? What should we be teaching? And then I had good advisors who transformed that question to say, what is actually learnable and teachable, and how will we know that? And so I ended up studying expert entrepreneurs on the lessons that they had learned. So, is
Oh,
that enough
wow.
of an introduction, or do you want me to say more?
No, it's perfect and amazing, and I think it sets perfectly the mood for discussing what we are talking about today. By the way, today you are connecting from the US, no? You are based in the
Yes,
US?
I'm in Charlottesville, in Virginia. In fact, it's a gorgeous spring day outside. At this moment, it's a little after 4 p.m. Yeah.
This is marvelous. I'm from Bilbao now. It's nighttime already, and it's been a rainy and windy day. So I'm delighted to have this opportunity to connect so far, no?
Mhm.
And today we are discussing your chapter of the book. I wish we had hours because this is a chapter I particularly enjoy. It's chapter 41, Effectuation and Open Innovation, which is part of section 7, Open Innovation and Theory. For me, this is very interesting because even though we set the base of the initial concept of open innovation in the earlier chapters, later on we talk about open innovation beyond the firm and in ecosystems and new developments. And in this chapter, we revisit new theories and evolution of the theory of open innovation. And your concept, effectuation and open innovation, has been a groundbreaking concept for me as a practitioner and as a fan of open innovation. I was sharing with you the anecdote that it was hard for me to understand it at the beginning, but thanks to my friend Marcel Bochers, I finally understood it, and it was at the same time so simple and so natural. So my first question always is, why do you think this chapter was meant to be in this book? How did it came to be in general?
It's a great question, and I can answer it both in terms of like personally, but also show you how open innovation and effectuation played a role in this chapter coming to be, right? So in effectuation, you're dealing with uncertainty. So you're dealing with an unpredictable future. So what do? If the future is fundamentally unpredictable, what can you do? You can actually build it, right? Because you cannot predict and you cannot place a bet. And the way you build it is you build it with other people. And so I had met Hank Chesborough while he was in Harvard at the time. And we actually had dinner together. So off and on, I've always looked into his work. And then there was Bruno Rondani in Brazil, who did his PhD in open innovation and effectuation. So he was the one who actually started thinking about putting these two things together. And then he became an entrepreneur himself. He started 100 open startups. It's an amazing venture he has built in Brazil, where he took the concepts of effectuation very seriously, combined it with open innovation to figure out these B2B partnerships between startups and very large companies. So through these conversations, I was already engaged with people who were actually doing more and working on this than I was. And so, but every once in a while they would show me, like Bruno would show me what he had done, and we would have conversations. So this thing was going on already before the book idea came about. So naturally, they invited me to do this. So it's part of Hank's work and the way he approaches open innovation, that he takes ideas, he looks at a lot of different things. So I was part of that bigger ecosystem in some ways. And then effectually, because of Bruno and I working together in both practically and intellectually, right? So it just made sense for me to do the chapter. Is that a good answer? Because it's
It's
truly, you can
perfect.
see the process at work in how this chapter came to be.
Yeah, and I like very much that every now and then it comes forward that the open innovation work in itself also works with open innovation, and it's very
Yes.
collaborative. And I like that a lot. And I think in this chapter, it makes sense to first ask you to please do this brief introduction to effectuation. What is effectuation?
So, as you can see, the word effectuation, as you mentioned, in some languages, there is no word for it. And so, what the heck do you do? So, I tell people just simply think about cause and effect, right? So, in all of science, we think about some effect that is already existing in the world or an effect that we want to create in the world. And then we ask ourselves, how can we make that happen? How can we cause a particular effect to happen, right? Whereas in effectuation, the opposite works, right? Effectuation is a process for creating new effects that you yourself might not have dreamed of with causes that you already have within your hand, only things within your control. So that's where the name causal and effectual comes from. And of course, the whole theory, the idea came from expert entrepreneurs. So in science, we always talk about we need to get better at predicting the future, because the better you can predict the future, the better you can have control, right? You can create effects the way you want to create. Whereas the expert entrepreneurs have done some through their experience, they have learned something very interesting. They are taking this thing of prediction leading to control, and they are separating it out. So then when you separate out like something like something that looks like a straight line, and you separate it into two parts and pull it apart, you get two dimensions. Then you get prediction as one dimension, control is another dimension, which means now you have a space of possibilities in strategy, right? So you can have high in prediction, high in control, low in prediction, low in control. You can imagine all four. And effectuation is low in prediction, high in control, right? You work with things within your control to co-create a future. And this comes straight from the experiences of these entrepreneurs who have built many, many different ventures, including success and failure, right? So these are truly people who are experts. So they've been through all the experiences. And then my job as a scientist was to come and extract, using tools from cognitive science, to extract from them the lessons that they had learned, and then take those lessons, they're kind of complex lessons, and then put them into a framework that we can actually teach. And that's basically been my life's work now for the last 20 years.
And it's amazing and very, very understandable. And I think this is where we can begin talking about linking effectuation with open innovation. Maybe it's beginning with these principles, no? What are the principles?
So I only told you about the space. So the question is, how do you do it? And there are 5 principles, and there may be more principles. I invite people to invent their own principles in that quadrant. But the 5 are really the bird in hand principle, which is you're always dividing the world into things within your control, things outside your control. So the bird in hand is the bird you have within your control, and you ask yourself, given the bird in hand, what kinds of effects can I create, right? So you're working with things within your control to create new effects. And what are the things within your control? Everybody thinks money is the first thing, and actually it's not money. It's who am I, what do I know, and whom do I know? So my identity, taste, preferences, etc., my knowledge, and my networks, right? So this is what everybody has. Even a poor illiterate woman in Bangladesh has that, believe it or not, right? She has some kind of identity. She has some skills and knowledge, and she knows people. She's part of a family. She's part of a village. So everybody has that. And then some of us might have more than that, right? So the bird in hand is really those 3 categories. And then we think about what are some things we can do with the bird in hand. And then you have to choose between them. So again, in business schools and in wealthier countries, we talk about expected return, right? So I could do project A or project B or project C, and I say which one is likely to give me the best return after risks are adjusted, things like that. Whereas the expert entrepreneurs are saying, given my bird in hand, given who I'm, what are some things that I can do for affordable loss? So I'm not thinking about the expected return. Instead, I'm thinking about the downside and how can I keep it within my control. And then, given my bird in hand and given my affordable loss, what do? I start talking with Marisol, right? I start talking with anybody and everybody. And some of those people I talk to become my stakeholder. So that becomes the crazy quilt principle because I am open, and here the open innovation begins to come in. I'm open to working with whoever wants to work with me in some ways, and each person is investing no more than they can afford to lose, right? So the moment you have a relationship, a commitment from somebody as a stakeholder, the crazy quilt starts developing, right? Then now the two of us can talk to somebody else, and then slowly, this is why I meet Hank first, and then I meet Bruno, and then I end up writing a chapter, right? It's so the crazy quilt sort of expands into, on the one hand, the resources are increasing. On the other hand, you converge into projects. So your goals or your effects come out of the process. You don't have to have them to begin with. Of course, along the way, things outside your control are going to hit you. That is the lemonade principle. Even though you are always working with things within your control, there are things outside your control which will also come your way. So you have to develop some skills of transforming unexpected contingencies into opportunities as well. And then through this process, you learn the logic, right? You learn the effectual logic, which is a logic of non-predictive control. And that sounds like a very technical term. But in simple term, what does it mean? It means that what you and I choose to do matters, that what the future comes from what we do. We can co-create not just our little projects, we can literally co-create the world and the future. And that is the pilot in the plane principle. So those are the 5 principles of effectuation. And I also already showed you how they work in the process.
This is amazing, and we have a very nice graphic, by the way, in the chapter. We are talking about the bird in hand and inside out open innovation, affordable lows and inside out innovation, crazy quilt and inside out innovation as well, lemonade, which is the other principle with inside out, and pilot in the plane with inside out. Here in the chapter, it's very well explained, but as you tell the principles, which is of course very natural, and it somehow helps you to put order into chaos in the entrepreneur experience and also show the opportunities. And I think it also emphasizes or makes you realize that we need a different set of values to learn to navigate this. No, like for example, be ready to not plan for a profit, but create these minimum loss. And we are talking about different kind of values and ways to approach this, and this also creates an effect on open innovation. No, so it's very interestingly put here, and we are getting close to the end of our conversation, but I wanted you please to share what is the connection between open innovation and effectuation and the main learnings that we have from this chapter.
Yeah. So one of the most important things in open innovation is the role of boundaries, right? What is inside an organization? What's outside an organization? How much of our inside do we share? Or how much of the outside do we let in? So the role of boundaries in open innovation is really interesting. That's why it's called open innovation, but it doesn't mean it's totally open, right? Because the openness is the value of open innovation, but the way you can make open innovation valuable is if you're always aware of the boundaries and the problems that come with boundaries, the opportunities that come with boundaries, and the difficulties of actually redrawing and transforming boundaries and things like that. So this idea of boundaries between organization is a nice place for effectuation to sit. So the thing that excited me about this chapter was I was always able to talk about effectuation in terms of, the organization doesn't exist yet, right? So these entrepreneurs are doing all of these things. But this chapter forced me to think about a causal or an effectual or an adaptive or a visionary, all these four quadrants, all the different ways you can tackle boundaries. And it also made me think philosophically about the word open. What does it mean? So I think there is some really interesting possibilities that are sort of touched on in the chapter, but is really for future research if people are interested to start thinking about boundaries. When do we take boundaries? Because in an effectual world, everything is created, right? The pilot in the plane, it's all co-created. Everything can change and you can shape and influence. So the interesting issue would be, when do you decide this is a boundary that I really want to consider like a constraint I want to keep, but here is the boundary that I can shift, or here is a boundary I just want to like destroy. Or how do I think about it? Can I build, do I, by building new boundaries, do I create value? So open innovation is for me, like a rich and fertile set of phenomena where we can explore the role of boundaries, but we can explore them in terms of prediction, in terms of control, right? So that I see as a number one connection. There are many connections. The chapter itself lays out several connections, including things like corporate innovation, B2B partnerships, things like that. So there are lots of practical things that are discussed in the chapter. But I think the key thing that we can spend time on, whether we are practitioners or thinkers, is really this notion of boundaries, and also seeing boundaries as something that we create and destroy, and boundaries as something that are not necessarily given in the world. Open innovation really challenges that idea of boundaries.
Wow, and I'm getting very inspired right now also into thinking about the system of boundaries that are happening in an ecosystem. Now, when you are interacting and many boundaries are dancing at the same time, and wow, this is
Yeah,
something that
in fact,
we're
when you look at biology, right, initially a couple of different organisms came together to make the cell, right? They had to cross some boundaries and they got into it, and then they created a boundary that is the biological cell from which all living things are made. So if you think about how did that happen, right there was a wonderful thing of crossing an open boundary but then closing it afterwards, so it became this so this is a very deep idea, the idea of boundaries, and so it's not only, so because you mentioned ecosystem, I was thinking about that, because an ecosystem, you can map an ecosystem as a set of boundaries, and the evolution of the ecosystem is how the boundaries evolve, right? And so that's why I think you have this idea of open innovation within an ecosystem, but we can also think about an ecosystem itself as a system that opens and closes in interesting ways.
Of course, of course. Wow. This is also mind blowing. I'm so excited of discussing and thinking about this. Really, as I mentioned at the beginning, for me, this is so like representative of what we are living as entrepreneurs, and the perfect mix between the practitioner and the theoretical world, which
Yes.
also I now learned today that it stems from your own life and your own journey. So we appreciate that a lot in the theory. And I think, wow, there's a lot of ground to be covered now, a lot of research and potential lines of exploration, no, for the future.
Yes.
I'm so humbled and really honored of having had the chance to speak today. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for sharing your point of view. I don't know, do you want to say a final word, a final call to action?
Nothing in particular. It's been a delight to meet you, and I got an opportunity to tell the story of Bruno and 100 Open Startups, which I had not done in my chapter. I wish I had actually mentioned in my chapter, but I got the opportunity to say that. So people check out Bruno Rondani and 100 Open Startups, because I think he's doing some amazing work in really bringing together effectuation and open innovation. So, and it's a great example from Brazil, a country that I love as well. So, please check that out. Let me leave that as the last word because it's a concrete example that works for people, and it's not in the chapter, so it's also something new that people can look up.
Perfect. We will try to mention him in the description as well so people can follow. And just to
And of
let
course, I would also like to point out if you want more information on effectuation, please just check out effectuation.org. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. And just for you to know that the Spanish word is efectuación.
Effectuación. See, we need effectuación.org dot whatever, Spain, right?
Right. And we will be working on that. And yeah, we are studying and talking about that a lot. So thank you very much for your time. And thank you for sharing your story. And we will keep talking about open innovation every week.
Thank you. And I will share my little bit of Spanish. Gracias.
Gracias. Thank you very much.
Right.